Hello, good morning, or good day. Today is March the 8th. It is Monday, and today we're going to finish up this study guide. And as I promised you, we will try and then to watch a film about imperialism, which I think that you'll enjoy, called The Last Samurai, which is about imperialism in Japan and how Japan reacted to it. It's a good film, trust me. So let's finish this unit, shall we? Now, go here. Thank you. Now, but before we do that, I'm sorry, I got ahead of myself. Sorry. So before we do that, let's look at some political cartoons of the era. Not that one. This one. Now, this is a political cartoon of the era. This one is depicting American imperialism to build the Panama Canal. Of course, this gentleman here you might recognize. This is President Theodore Roosevelt, and the caption of this cartoon is "Go away, little boy." This person here represents Colombia. Colombia, and as we're going to find out, owned Panama until 1904. And somehow Panama became independent, and we will talk about that. And so, yes, this cartoon shows you something you probably never knew, and that is this. That it won't let me make it bigger. Oh well. Hopefully you can see that. But what you have here, this of course is the American symbol, complete with American eagle. These are American soldiers who were stationed in the Philippines. And these people with blindfolds are Filipino males. And here's, of course, their commanding officer. And the caption reads, well, here you see it, kill everyone over 10. That was actually a command given by an American general in the Philippines. See, because after the Spanish-American War, you know, the United States tried to take over the Philippines. Well, the Filipinos didn't like the Americans running their country much more than they liked the Spanish running their country, and they resisted. And there was an insurgency and revolt, and and after that you see acts like this, and it says kill everyone over 10. Probably not something you think about when you think about the United States of America. This one is about the same era. And now, as you look at this map, they're considering that occurs right after the Spanish-American War of 1898, and people are talking about erecting a canal to connect the Atlantic Ocean with the Pacific Ocean. And as you see here, this person who is I forget what his name was. He was a businessman who was really interested in constructing this canal. But I want you to also notice when you look at this cartoon, and that's Uncle Sam back there bringing the tools, that look at all the flags referring to American possessions in 1898. Cuba, Puerto Rico, over here is the Philippines, Hawaii, and yes, Alaska, which was owned by the United States. And even flags up here. I don't know what that refers to. But yes, so interesting. And finally, this map. This map shows how basically the United States was built. All right, and so this was the original 13 colonies and their territories in the brown. In 1803, President Thomas Jefferson bought the Louisiana Purchase from Napoleon. Then, this is Texas, which for about 10 years was the Republic of Texas, and the United States annexed it, and as a result of that annexation, got into an argument with Mexico over where the southern border was. And we're going to talk about this later, but the United States said it was the Rio Grande. Mexico said it was the Nueces River that ran about 100 miles north. And so the president at the time, I think his name was Zachary Taylor, he sent soldiers, American soldiers, into the disputed area. And there was a firefight, and some of the American soldiers were killed. And because of that, they said that Mexican armies had spilled American blood on American soil. Therefore, the Mexican War of 1847 kicked off. And of course, I mean, basically, the United States was bullying a weaker country, that being Mexico. And it took about a couple of years. But yeah, the United States beat up Mexico. And Mexico, as a result of that beating, had to give up all this. All of this. And I talked about yesterday how California alone, if it was an independent country today, it would be the sixth largest economy in the world. And by the way, oh yes, the United States, after they beat up Mexico, they flipped them a paltry $15 million and said, thanks, guys. Love doing business with you. Of course, now this is the Oregon Territory that a deal was worked out between the United States and Great Britain. I don't remember them asking the Native Americans who lived there, though. Maybe they did not. Yeah, this is not, this area here is the so-called Gadsden Purchase. This was bought from Mexico for like $7 million. And the reason that the United States bought this was because they wanted to build a railroad through here, and this was the best route, and they purchased that. Of course, this is Alaska, this is Hawaii. That was annexed in 1898. Annex, which is a nice word of basically forcing themselves on Queen Laleukilani, and Alaska was purchased from Russia in 1867. Once again, nobody asked the native Aleutian people who lived there, but that's all right. So let's finish this, shall we? Another example of American imperialism was the building of the Panama Canal. Interesting story. You know, once again, I hope that you are familiar with this Panama Canal. Panama Canal was a canal that connected the Atlantic Ocean out here with the Pacific Ocean out here, thereby cutting the trip from the East Coast to the West Coast literally in half. And that was great. The United States wanted to build it. And of course, build it was AKA build it and own it and operate it and receive all the profits from it. The United States, once again, was not the first country to try to build a canal. The first country to try to build a canal was France, and they failed. So let's get back to this. The U.S. had long dreamed of such a canal, and the SA War, Spanish-American War. The United States realized just how badly it needed it if it was going to be able to exert naval influence in both the Pacific and Atlantic Oceans. There were three possible sites picked out for the canal. One, of course, was in the site which had eventually occurred, Panama, the narrowest part of land between North and South America. The second, they actually thought about building a canal, digging it through Nicaragua, because in Nicaragua, in the middle of the country, there's a giant lake, and the idea was simply to dig to the lake and then use the lake to traverse across much of Nicaragua and then finish the canal to the Pacific. And yet another of digging a canal through Mexico, which was much longer, but the land was much flatter. Eventually, though, they decided it was to go through Panama. A French company led by the French engineer who built the Suez Canal, his name Lesseps, led an attempt to build the Panama Canal and failed. Why they failed? Oh, a few reasons. This Ferdinand de Lesseps guy had actually, built the Suez Canal, but the Suez Canal is a desert. It's flat and it's sand or sandstone. On the other hand, the Panama Canal crosses a mountain range, It is not sand or sandstone. It has giant rocks in it, the size of this building. And oh yeah, two other things. A big thing was that in Panama, for 3 months out of every year, it rains, and I mean solid day-to-day rain. And I don't know if you ever watch construction sites occur, but construction sites will, they'll do construction in the snow, they'll do construction in the heat of the summer. One thing that will shut down a construction site is rain, because the rain makes the soil unstable, mud, and suddenly, yeah, and no. And so, for 3 months out of every year in the Panama Canal, since it's in the tropic, it rains, which leads to another problem. The problem that probably ended the French uh, attempt to build the Panama Canal was about this long. Mosquitoes. Mosquitoes carry yellow fever, was the big killer, malaria, and other illnesses. And yeah, I mean, 10,000 workers died of mosquito-borne illnesses. And the French finally said, all right, we're done, and packed up, went back home. Now, Panama at the time, though, was owned by Colombia. My wife would kill me if she knew that I'd spell Colombia that way. Was owned by Colombia, and Colombia didn't have a lot of love for the United States. You know what I'm saying? And the last thing they wanted was for the United States of America, the Colossus of the North, as they called it, the big bully, the Yankees, to come to their backyard and make money off of a business venture in Colombia, because Panama was part of Colombia. So TR, that being Teddy Roosevelt, responded by encouraging a revolt in Panama, and said, said to Panama, hey, Panama, how'd you guys like to be an independent country? And they said, well, okay, but we don't want to like die or anything in a revolution. And Roosevelt said, you let us worry about that. And what the United States did, Panama declares itself independent. And before the government of Colombia can even move to stop this, the United States just happens to park a battleship, the USS Nashville, in right off the port harbor of Medellin, Colombia, their biggest port, and said, "You do anything to this new country and this new friend of ours, bad things gonna happen." So the new nation of Panama was born. Panama Flag actually has a lot of American elements in it. It is, and I'll just pull it up. It's easier to show. In fact, it's easier. Let me pause. Let me pause. Let me pause. Yes, we're back. And if you haven't noticed, I'm a nerd who loves flags. Me and Sheldon Cooper, we have our own club called the Flag Club. This is the flag of Panama. I think perhaps you can see elements of the American flag in it. Well, I don't know, like the stars, the colors, you know. And so, yeah, that's the flag of Panama. That's what it looks like, two stars. So, what obstacles did the new canal builders face? Same ones, really. But the big one was disease, mosquito-borne illnesses. And, one thing that the U.S. could be proud of, they put American ingenuity to it. Two doctors, Dr. Walter Reed and Dr. Josiah Gorgas, who was from Alabama, by the way, they actually traced the yellow fever, theorized that it came from mosquitoes. And what they did was that they began a campaign all around construction sites to drain every body of standing water, because that's where mosquitoes lay their eggs. They lay their eggs in standing water. They lay their eggs in standing water, or if they couldn't drain it, they would spray it with a small, slight film of oil. And oil, once an insect gets oil on its body, you see insects breathe through little openings in their thorax. You guys who take biology know this, called spirochetes. And you get oil on that, they basically can't breathe. And so that's the end of them. And canal construction went on. It took 10 years, 1904 to 1914. It opened in same year, World War I. The Roosevelt Corollary. The Roosevelt Corollary was a corollary for those of you guys who take math. A corollary is a statement made in addition to a former statement. The former statement in this case was the Monroe Doctrine. The Roosevelt Corollary basically was, Roosevelt said that the United States has the right. The United States has the right In other words, the United States can go into these foreign countries whenever it seems fit. That's imperialism. You can't do that. You just can't just go into a country and say, we don't like the way things are going, we're going to change it. But the United States has a history of doing that. For example, the United States, the Dominican Republic got into serious debt with a couple of Britain and Germany. And Britain and Germany threatened to come over and collect. The United States intervened. By intervening, they went to the Dominican Republic, and the United States Marines collected import taxes, import duties, until the debt was paid. And they say, well, wasn't that nice of us? Yeah, it'd be like somebody coming, like you were having difficulty paying your electric bill, like somebody coming to your house and snatching your food or something else until your electric bill was paid. Your electric bill's paid, but in the 20th century, for example, the United States has invaded, like the film says, Nicaragua three times militarily. Even though the United States and Mexico share a border of 1,000 miles, the relationship between the United States and Mexico has often been strained, often. And the United States has, profited from the benefit of having a weak neighbor to the south. Remember that at one time, Mexico owned about 30% of the present United States, which included Texas, California, Arizona, New Mexico, Nevada, Utah. Consider this, that some of the richest, as it says there, are ranked top 10 in the world, ranked 6, and that Texas is bigger than half the nations in the world in terms of resources and portions of the country. How did Mexico give up such territories? Well, we talked about that before. The United States basically bullied them into a war, and they won. Napoleon of the West, his name was, he had a long name, but president, general president, who, that Napoleon of the West thing, that was more myth than reality. Yeah. Texas became independent of Mexico in 1836, basically because the Texicans, and see, here's another thing you don't know, that the Alamo, and while we're at it, I know I have a picture of the Alamo, and I know exactly where it is. The Alamo, which is right here, for those of you who are searching for Pee Wee Herman's bicycle, the Alamo, where 189 so-called Texicans, that's what they call themselves, died. But what most people don't know is the reason why Texas wanted independence from Mexico was because Mexico outlawed slavery. And the Texans, most of whom were cotton farmers, said, we want to have our slaves. And that makes the stand at the Alamo seem a lot less brave when you think about that was the reason they were dying. And so the United States then basically goaded the fledgling Mexican government into a war and took the western half of the United States from Mexico and paid them $15 million for it. Santa Anna was exiled, replaced largely by a liberal-thinking intellectual named Benito Juarez. His followers become known as the Juaristas. Juarez was a Zapote Indian and rose to the ranks of the leadership, which is rather odd in Central and South America, that Native Americans assume leadership positions. Status in Mexico and instituted a reform movement called La Reforma. Santa Anna had sent him into exile. Mexico remained disunited and racked by internal fighting and strife right up through the 20th century. It really did. In fact, there was an attempt by the Mexican government in the 1920s to actually abolish the Roman Catholic Church. It was called the Cristo Rey Revolution. Cristo Rey, Christ the King. In 1862, the Emperor of France, Napoleon III, convinced his brother-in-law, Maximilian, that he would make a good Emperor of Mexico, and he propped up his rule with French soldiers. In fact, Cinco de Mayo celebrates the first victory of Mexican soldiers over French soldiers in 1862. Why didn't the United States do something about this violation of the Monroe Doctrine? Well, look at the years, 1862 to 1867. The United States was busy in a little dust-up called the American Civil War. But in 1867, Napoleon had to pull his troops out, and Maximilian was executed by firing squad. Juarez returned to the presidency and reinstituted a system of reforms, promoted trade with other countries, opened up a system of roads and railroads, established a telegraph, and a national public education system. He died of a heart attack in 1872, and many of his reforms died with him. He was followed by a new caudillo. Caudillo, once again, means corrupt politician. He was a corrupt official who hampered Mexico's progress. Diaz was a dictator who used brutality to enforce his methods. However, with Diaz, there was order, built railroads, stabilized the currency, but in this, the wealthy acquired more, and the poor became more destitute. Francisco Madero was a leader of the early 20th century. Under Madero, we see the rise of this guy, Pancho Villa. Pancho Villa was a bandit. Yes. He raided about 1,000 men, kill lots of Americans, and he'd raid towns, rob banks, kill lots of people, and then to avoid prosecution, hop back into Mexico. And so in 1911, the United States got tired of it, and they sent the United States Army under General Blackjack Pershing, who spent a year searching for Pancho Villa in Mexico. Never found the guy. Although there's a legend that says that one day Pancho Villa was in this bar, and he's sitting there, and suddenly the bartender comes up with a drink, gives him a drink, and and he said, the bartender said, from one of your admirers, the gentleman over there. And then the bartender went back. Pershing raised his glass, drank, sat there some more. Bartender comes back, another drink, and Pershing said, "Who's this from?" Pointed the man again. One of your admirers. Pershing raises his glass, drinks, and then finally another third glass comes. Same thing. Who's this from? It's from the man on the bar. Well, Pershing said, "Well, who's the man on the bar?" "Oh, that's Pancho Villa." And then when Pershing looked back up, he had disappeared. Anyway, Emiliano Zapata, the next ruler, Land and Liberty was his party name. Madero resigned and was replaced by the military general Victoriano Huerta. Vistana Carranza was the ruler who tried to do away with Roman Catholicism. In the Mexican Civil War of 1919, the Cristo Rey Revolution cost more than 1 million Mexican citizens their lives. Then Mexico found relative peace under the rule of Estanio Carranza. And yeah, and like I said, to this day, the relationship between the United States and Mexico is still, yeah, big brother, and I wouldn't even call it little brother, but it's not a great relationship. And with that, I will stop.